Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this, what I predict to be a lively discussion for a Monday night. Is Generation X the greatest generation, or is there candidates for other generations? I have a prediction that we're going to get a mix of yes and no on this. I guess that's really not much of a prediction, yes and no. But before we do that, let me just say, as you've noticed already, there's no opening theme song. I am working on a new one. And the reason why I'm working on a new one is because of the whole copyright issue with that last song that I've talked about before. This is the weirdest thing that's happening. I have submitted all the disputes on the copyright claims, and on those copyright claims, it's the same song that's being disputed, and sometimes they'll come back and they'll say yes. They will say, oh, we've decided to let you go ahead and use the song. And other times they'll come back and they'll say, no, we haven't decided to let you use that song. So I'm just scrapping that song altogether, going to film a new intro. And if you've noticed on the last couple of videos, I've had a new song which I totally have the copyright for. It's part of the Apple Music library that you get when you use iMovie, and so it's totally 100% available for me to use. And I finally found one on there that I actually enjoy using. So I'm going to be using that, and so it just takes a matter of refilming that. We're going not to be so long tonight. Part of it is I just feel a little bit under the weather. I'm not feeling that good. My throat is actually very sore right now, and I don't know how much speaking power I'm going to be able to have. So, with that said, we're just going to jump right into it, and I'm going to bring my friend Thrash Pondo on. How you doing, Thrash?
I'm actually moving at the moment, so we'll kind of put that in the win column and move forward. Pun
Right,
intended.
right.
I don't know why it's
Well,
only on our junkets that I freeze up like that. I'll try to I'll strike a pose so that if I do freeze, it'll be at least something dignified, like
yeah,
maybe
okay, all right. Not something bizarre, at
creepy.
least, or
Yeah,
something.
creepy.
Yeah. So, with that, let's go ahead and say hi to the people who are in the channel. We're going to speed things along a little bit
Let's
tonight. I'm very
let
sorry. I just don't feel that well tonight, and I don't know how much speaking power I'm going to have. My throat is hurting pretty bad, so we'll see how long I've got before I just kind of poop out here.
Peter
So,
out.
yeah.
To pay Paul. Peter to pay Paul. Lance Chafin says, Hiya, Ian and Thrash. I love the Thrash shirt. You rock that Thrash shirt, young man.
Awesome.
Yeah,
We're gonna get him on the program too. We got to do one with him, with
definitely.
him as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Crossing of the Door says, even though I'm Gen X, I think generations previous were a bit better, specifically the wartime generation.
Yes. So we have the Great Generation, then we have Boomers, and then we have Generation X, then Zennials, Millennials, and then Gen Z is kind of how things are divided up sociologically. I understand that. We'll circle back around to that when we talk about this. Actually, after we say hi to everybody.
Zuplex says, more like Generation X rated for the birth of the porn industry. That started before us, so.
Did it? Did it really?
Mm, mm, it
I'm,
sure
I'm. I
did.
think it's been around a long time. I mean, I have no idea.
It actually has. It actually, not that I'm an expert on it, but it actually goes back to the advent of the film industry. There were always people making, shall we say, naughty films. There were actually people whose job was they would literally go around and they would have these like very discreet like business cards, and they'd have their own projector and whatnot, and they would for like gentlemen's clubs or speakeasies or even bachelor parties, they would set up and show these naughty films, and that
Right,
goes
right.
back to the 1920s. Let's just see what we got here. I think it's just the three of them so far. So, oh wait, no, wait, there's more. Wait, there's more.
We got
Tracy
lots of people
Myers,
in here.
yeah. Tracy Myers says, "Hi guys."
Hey, Tracy.
Wajimine says, "Hello everyone."
Hello, Wajimine. How you doing, my friend?
Terrell Eugene Bellinger says, "Hello guys. I was born in 1986, a millennial, but I have a few family members who are Gen Xers."
Yes. Yeah.
And
Terrell, I have to call on Terrell here for a minute. I have to. So here's assignment for you, Terrell. If you're interested, you know how you ask like the best questions that are so fun to talk about. If you want to make a list of those questions, I would love to do a podcast on those questions alone. That would be great. Like just make a list of all those questions and it won't be live. It'll just be those questions and I would love to kind of go over those things. You seriously have some of my favorite questions. So that would be cool. If you're willing to do that, I would really appreciate it. That would be fun to do one of these days.
Your mission if you choose to accept it.
Right, exactly.
Excellent. But I believe that's all the hellos for this stage of the proverbial ball game.
Of the game. All right. Well, let's get back to this. Then this thing about the greatest generation. I kind of want to know why people think that it's the greatest, or the war generation is the greatest generation. I mean, I get it. I mean, there was such. I don't know. I think the American spirit was at an all-time high back then. We won
it's
World War. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's more than just World War II. You have to remember when these people were children, it was the depths of the Great Depression. They were going around with no shoes. They were wearing like hand-me-downs with patches on the patches. Many of these people had nothing, literally nothing, and they survived it literally with no more than sheer iron will. The government wasn't helping them. Big industry wasn't helping them. Their neighbors were no better off. Their neighbors weren't helping them. I mean, read Steinbeck sometime. I mean, it's not science fiction. I mean, this is the way things were for a lot of people. There were some parts of the country that managed to get by at least comfortably, if not as with the same flair as before the Depression. But people literally had nothing. And not only did they survive it, but they brought us to victory in the greatest conflict this world had ever seen. Not just a war, the greatest global conflict the world had ever seen. I mean, yes, World War II was pretty flippin' bad, but World War II, people really didn't think that the world economy was going to survive, and it did. And it was because these people that grew up barefoot eating sawdust reached down into themselves, brought us out of the Depression, and then finally to ultimate victory over the Axis. Now, they certainly have their faults, but their accomplishment eclipses any other living generation I can think of.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, that is something to be said. I get it. I get that's something to be said. And it depends on what the marker of greatest is for you. You mean, like, what are we talking about when you mean like greatest? So, I mean, that is a big marker, and I see it, and I feel the pull of that as well. But I love my generation. I really do. I like Gen X. I feel like I have been blessed to live. I wish I was younger because I'm excited about the future. Maybe life expectancy will be longer in the near future, but I mean I feel like the overall tone of Gen X, where we grew up seeing what we wanted to have happen actually happen, and then living before that time. I mean, we lived in a time of Walkmans, and now we have a time of digital downloads. And I think we've got the best of both worlds. Personally, I do. I mean, when I was a kid, I just to ride bikes into nowhere, and then come back fine and not have to worry about it. So, but I also had a level of technology that I enjoy and would not want to live without, even as a kid. That I wouldn't want to live in the technological age that my parents or my grandparents grew up in. I just wouldn't want to live in that age. For me personally, it's a little bit selfish, but I couldn't imagine myself living back in a time. Um, I mean, obviously, yes, of course, a time before the internet, but a time before the ability to walk, to have a Walkman, to have a VCR, to have those things. Um, I feel like that's influenced me. And then the other thing that I really like about it is just the sarcasm. I love sarcasm. And I think that we are the generation of sarcasm. Anyway, so, and you know, did you get a chance to watch the interview I did with Dave?
I haven't, and I'm ashamed of myself. It's been a crazy week. I'm not going to bore you with the
No,
details, but
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I just wondered if you did. But we had this conversation, and we had this conversation about television too, and how we as Gen Xers kind of grew up around the television, babysitting, you know, being babysit by the television, but also at having being kind of a family time. Now I know that there was television before, but we grew up in an era where you could like have your own television, where you can watch your own shows, but it wasn't so advanced that you know that you could have it anytime. You just push play and it was on. But it was interesting because the concept of the show that I did with Dave was going to be about boomer shows that Gen Xers enjoyed too, or enjoyed just as much as their parents. But it turned into this really sophisticated philosophical conversation about the culture of TV. So it was much more than that. I see we got some more comments here, so we can
we
say
sure
hi to
do.
people.
Gotta say hi to Tug. Tug,
Oh yeah,
hey, dropping in to say hi. I'm listening, but also serving dinner to the Mrs. Tug.
I understand. Thank you for saying hi.
Oh, and Teb says, I accept the challenge, Ian. I'll send you a list of questions over on Twitter.
Okay, I will make it a podcast for sure.
Zuplex says the so-called greatest generation was just a ploy by Tom Brokaw to sell his book. Naturally, nobody sprinkled pixie dust on the American public in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I mean, I think Superplex brings up a good point here. I don't know exactly the book that he's mentioning about by Tom Brokaw, but I get it. No, you know, naturally, nobody sprinkled pixie dust on the American public in the 30s and 40s says quite a bit. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Lance Javen says World War II people celebrated when the troops came home. Vietnam, they booed and hissed when the troops came home. Cute.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, you know, the Vietnam War, there was more of the boomer generation. Our parents were, you know, generation, and I mean that's a tough one. They lived in a time where, well, people, you know, America began to be divided. Um, Not that there wasn't divisions before, but the social division that came about as a result of the hippie movement was or that you know really caused by and resulted in both the hippie movement was such a dividing line. And I really see it as a dividing line that still exists to this day. That kind of mentality where you can eat your own, you know, where it isn't just it's almost like a sad, like the poor loser mentality. Like it used to be we could agree to disagree. And I think that and if you lost, you were just like, okay, next time we'll get them. Next time we'll spread our message around, and now and we'll convince more people of our arguments. And it was very reasonable. That really was the spirit of the American attitude. And then we go, okay, we got to show loyalty to America, even though my party didn't get in place. I still want to support America. And now today we're just I mean, it's almost like it's a social. Honestly, it's a social civil war is what's happening right now. We're having a cold civil war is what we're doing, is what we're seeing now. But I really see the beginning of that, where it's okay to fire upon Americans. It's okay to exclude, over people who might have different ideologies based on whatever than you. And I really see the beginning of that in the hippie movement. The hippie movement was really the beginning of that, when you see troops coming home, and instead of saying, "Hey, man, I'm sorry you went through that. Yeah, I didn't believe in the war. It's okay to spit on these people," and that's a real sad state of affairs.
Daily Dan is with us saying greetings from South Carolina.
Greetings, Daily Dan. How you doing, my friend?
And Zuplex says Brokaw's book was entitled The Greatest Generation. Yes, and it was basically a love letter to the World War II generation, if I remember correctly. It came out, about 30 years ago? I'm going back a bit.
Yeah.
And Terrell Eugene Bellinger says, Ian, what are your thoughts on the recent passing of Jerry Springer?
My thoughts on the recent I haven't had much thoughts on the passing of Jerry Springer. So I mean, again, it's one of those things like, don't ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. When one person dies, we all die a little bit. And it's just a reminder that life is short and we're all going to face that one of these days. Other than those generalities, I don't have any thoughts on it. I didn't really care for him a whole lot. I didn't ever really watch the show. I mean, it was kind of a little bit of a cultural icon, I guess, but it was a cultural icon that I don't feel really influenced me in any way. So I don't want to be hard-hearted toward it at all. It's not my intention, but quite honestly, it's just like, it's another person who passed away. It wasn't as close to me as some of these other celebrities that I really grew up watching who have passed away, like the girl from Night Court and Farrah Fawcett, and all these people that I grew up with. I guess what I'm saying is Jerry Springer didn't have enough of emotional impact on me, or growing impact on me, for me to care as much as I did. Not that I don't care, because he's a person, so I still care, but it wasn't like I'm devastated by it. So.
Oh, and Tug liked your cold civil war. A good turn of phrase. Very accurate. Let's hope it stays cold civil. Or more civil than cold, I should say.
Right. I didn't come up with it, by the way. I mean, I think I heard it from someone else, but I'm not sure who I heard it from at the time. Maybe I did come up with it. I don't know.
You know what Orson Welles said? We borrow from each other all the time, and that's fine. It's when you start stealing from yourself you should be ashamed.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There we go. But yes, but as far as this generation goes, my biggest complaint about my generation, and I am probably the worst offender, so I can actually complain with a clear conscience. When I was growing up in the 80s, there was this feeling that the world was a coiled spring. When we got out of college and started being able to get our hands on things, get into the nitty gritty, we were going to solve all the world's problems, and there would be this utopia. There would be this golden age because we had all the right ideas, because we had two things in our favor. We were standing on the backs of giants. We had the iron will of, for want of a better term, the greatest generation. And we had the social concern, the consciousness of our parents' generation. And a lot of that, I have to see that show you did on TV, because I think a lot of that plays to that. The TV of the 80s, except for things like MTV, was very socially conscious. It had lessons. Don't hit children. Don't beat your spouse. Don't do drugs. Don't drink in excess unless it's the weekend. I mean, all the lessons we needed to learn were there. All we had to do was create enough awareness to them. There was a level of naivete that I really am a little ashamed of myself for. And the saddest thing is I'm on the home stretch. We never really accomplished anything. We created awareness. We talked about things. We had
Mhm.
open discussions. In my opinion, we peaked in First Gulf. First Gulf was sort of that was our high watermark. We got out of college, and when I say we, I didn't serve. A lot of my friends did. Our generation served. Our
Right.
generation fought that first Gulf War. It was a victory that America really, really needed. We spent the next 6 months celebrating it. American population became galvanized. You know what? Even the people who were against it, we liked. We're like, you know what? You guys, you know, you don't agree with us, but at least you have the interest of the country. You don't want anybody to get killed, and I can't fault you for that. You guys are okay in my book, and we did great, and we just sort of coasted through the '90s, and I kept waiting for us to actually do something, and next thing you know, there's been a couple generations since, and take
Those
it.
are interesting. No, I'm just saying that those were interesting thoughts. So would you boil it? So you're saying that the Generation X created awareness,
Mhm,
or at least pushed awareness, but
mhm.
your complaint is, and that's good on our side, but your complaint is that we didn't accomplish anything. Is that the?
Yes, we created it's like saying, well, we created awareness to um okay, I'll pick one from here. Water contamination on Cape Cod. They're concerned the water on Cape Cod isn't very good. We're all aware of that now. None of us have none of us have done anything to stop it. We drink more bottled water for reasons that are all too obvious. But
Hmm.
we identified the problem in vivid detail and all agree that we need to do something. And then put it off for the next 30 years. The town is actually, I'm living in, is actually voting on building a water treatment plant, which we should see sometime in the late 2030s. So that's something. But as far as actually solving the ills of society, like we said we were going to do, well, we talked about it a lot, and our intentions were good, but our follow through was not quite there.
Hmm. I see what you're saying. I would have to chew on. I mean, you bring up really good points. I'd have to chew on that a bit. I don't know if some of the issues you're talking about solving are solvable. That's the problem, because you can't get rid of that
Probably not.
human element. You know what I mean? But I can't say that we haven't lessened some of them, though. I think
All
one
right.
of our biggest problems, I think we've lessened some of them. We've done some work to help, put up battered homes and stuff like that. Where I see, like you're saying, we created the awareness in these television shows, "Don't beat your wife," but then did we do anything about it? The question is how do you solve that problem? And then my biggest complaint, I don't mean to get political here, but my biggest complaint is everybody looks to the government to try to solve those kind of problems, and they never do. It's the most inefficient form of solving things that you can think of. I mean, I feel like that's solved more on a personal basis, getting to the heart of a person and having that change that person. Where I see problems solved is in people being active in their community, and people being, like going and you and me feeding the poor, rather than trying to think, well, I'll pay taxes to the government, then the government can create an institution in which the people at the top make a whole lot of money and create a whole lot of problems for people who need that money. And it just become, you know what I mean? Like, let's say I'm a poor person, I need some food. More than likely, somebody from a church community is going to come give me food. Then I'm going to be able to apply for food stamps and get all that stuff. And then that money, that it's not like they created any money. They take it from people. So, but then they take it from people. But the person who's in charge of filtering people, that person's got to get paid. So that money doesn't get the people who are poor. The person above those, you know what I'm saying? It's like I think
Yeah.
we've
Mm.
I think we've lessened the problem in some
We have,
respect, but
but
it's more on a personal.
see, I think, and maybe I was overly ambitious, or maybe I was overly naive, probably a little of both. But remember the scene in Soylent Green where Saul is complaining, and Heston says to him, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know things were better in your day," and he snaps. He goes, "Oh hell no! People were always rotten." I
Yeah.
had really hoped that we would create a generation where people weren't rotten. We would actually create a better class of people, and I think while we may have set the bar a little higher, I think we created plenty of bad people. And I don't know, maybe I just thought by now some of the social problems that we're facing would have been taken care of, and it seems like they weren't. And I think I blame myself. I think I beat myself up about things that I'm only marginally responsible for. That might just
Well,
be.
I don't think you should. I don't think you should beat yourself up. I think you
Thank you.
should. No. All right.
Thank you.
Well, I think we've
Oh,
got some other.
we sure do. Bobby Renee is here. He says, "Hello, host and host with the most." That's me. You're
All
the
right.
host.
All
I'm the
right.
host with the most. There you
Okay. All
go.
right. I won't.
There we
I won't
go.
argue with you.
There you go. And Cindy D is here and says, "Hello, everyone."
Hello, everyone. We can't miss
Eh.
this comment though. I want to make sure we get
Oh,
this comment.
Tracy Ruffmeyer says, "I think when the Berlin Wall came down was pretty eventful. It certainly was, particularly if your name is David Hasselhoff. But that was a huge, huge deal. It certainly
Right.
was for all
No,
of us."
it really was, and I do think that, I mean, wherever you land on the political landscape, I do, I mean, Reagan was just a stalwart individual, and his stance in just not giving in on the Cold War was phenomenal. Was really phenomenal. And I'll leave it at that. But yeah, that was very eventful. I remember one time though. No, wait. I remember one time in school. It wasn't in school. Where was it? I can't remember. Was it at a community place or whatever? But it was like the 10th anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down, and it came down in '89. And the teacher was saying, we just had the 10-year anniversary of a major event, and it was 89, so it was 99. And I said, and I just, for some reason, I saw a magazine that same week that had like 10-year-old movies in it, and I'm like, yeah, Say Anything came out in '89, and he was like,
equally as important.
yeah. I could tell you where my mind was, right? It was on, I was like, and I didn't mean it as a joke. I thought that's where he was going.
Oh no,
I'm
sure.
I really did think that's where he's talking about the Berlin Wall coming down, and I'm talking about the 10-year anniversary of Say Anything coming out. All right, bring that back up.
Zuplex says the biggest challenge facing America today is the phenomenon of globalization and the capacity of American to compete against low-wage economies. Professor, wow.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. I mean, quite honestly, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I won't say much about it. I want to say a lot about it, but I won't say much about it. But I love that comment. Just so you know, I love that comment.
It's a very good comment. It's just it's there's a lot going on there. That's a whole show in and of itself.
Right.
That's a poli-sci show. And Tug says the problem is we can't come to any kind of common ground agreement on how to solve problems. That is possibly the wisest thing anyone here has ever said. It's like everyone, even if we agree that there is a problem, everyone's ways to fix it are completely different and usually competing with each other. My example is, okay, a plane crashes somewhere between California and Hawaii, raft full of survivors. Half of them say, let's row to Hawaii. The other half say, let's row back to California. If they both go their own direction, they're not accomplishing anything. If anything, they're working against each other. And I could not agree with you more, Tug. I could not agree with you more.
That is the problem. But the problem is that the way we want to solve problems is often not fact-based, but ideologically based, unfortunately. And then we get things in our minds that, and I'm not an exception to this. I am not an exception to this. We all have presuppositions. The question is whether or not we're going to recognize those presuppositions in our own life and try our best to test them. So, I mean, I've always thought about this. Like, I'm not really into universal health care. I see the problem. A sick person needs medicine. But is the answer to that problem a governmental subsidy? And I don't think so. I think that we have much better time reaching out to one another. I'd have a much better and easier time paying for you to get the medicine you need, or chipping in through a resource like GoFundMe to get that, than to get onto some government thing. So I mean, so we see the problem, but then we also have, like, we disagree on how to solve that problem. Anyway, so I always, I agree with that 100%.
Tim says, I have a feeling that some Gen Xers don't like what millennials and Gen Zers are doing now, the same way boomers didn't like what Gen Xers did in the past.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that everybody, there's a Vsauce episode on this, like how far this goes back, like the previous, like, what are these kids thinking, and he traces it all the way back to the Middle Ages, that he can find, like, somebody complaining about how the kids are being raised in this generation. So it's very interesting. We always kind of look at the next generation and go, well, but we're in fear of it. And we're in fear of the way, things are being run. And I think right now it's more than ever, though. I mean, I don't necessarily dislike millennials. My girlfriend's a millennial, so I can't dislike them entirely. But I do think that sometimes you get, that mentality of people owe me something, or if I'm not entertained 24 hours a day, then there's something wrong. I kind of worry about that and how that's going to impact the world. But the biggest solvent of that is growing up. That's the biggest. I mean, when you have to pay your bills, or you're worried about foreign invaders, or you're worried about whatever, that solves a lot of those problems.
Cindy D says, we are too divided today. A house divided cannot stand. Jesus Christ and Abraham Lincoln said it for a reason. We need to embrace all generations.
Of course. Yes, of course we need to embrace all generations. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Good point, Cindy.
No, you said it all. That says it all. You are so right. The last thing we need is more division right now. We need to find a way to have common ground as a people, and we are a people with vast differences that, let's face facts, may not be all erased anytime soon, but we are a people.
It's impossible to erase the differences. That's the problem, is that you have idea, and everybody does have ideas that are just nearly impossible to erase.
It's like a family that's dysfunctional. You learn to live with them. You don't necessarily have to have everyone in the family comply. You just, okay, that's my aunt. She's a little crazy. Or that's my kid brother. He can be a pain in the ass. So we are still a family. And that's possibly the greatest oversimplification I could possibly give you. In fact, the oversimplification bank called. I'm overdrawn. But it all comes down to that. We still are a people. And up until recently, we had learned to live with each other almost okay. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Actually, I got a pretty good idea, but I won't get into that. Anyway, we have another one. ZuperX brings up an excellent point. Reagan wasn't around when the Berlin Wall came down. The end of the Cold War had more to do with the Marshall Plan, the NATO alliance, and the strength of Western democracies.
I know Reagan was out in by 88 and 88. and it was in, but I can't deny the fact that he laid a good foundation for making America a strong economy. So, and I'm not taking away from any of those other things as well, but I don't know if any of those other things could really have happened without somebody like a stalwart person like Reagan, personally. But we're allowed to agree to disagree.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I will always remember that. And you're right, there probably was a lot more to it, but I still think he, at the risk of using the word galvanized twice in the same chat, he galvanized, I think, the Western commitment to ending the Berlin Wall. Not necessarily the Cold War, but the Berlin Wall. Denny Staten says, LOL, I would head to Hawaii even if California was 500 miles closer, just saying.
All right, Danny.
And Tug says, I'm totally with you on the whole be a good neighbor rather than expect the government to fix things, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Cindy D says, there is no money to be made in solutions, just problems. The world goes around with institutions are fueled by pain and suffering.
Boy, that's a true statement. I mean, I can't agree with that more. The world really is run by money, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the least, but I do see that it is, it's a lot more beneficial financially for people to have the money coming in, and one of the problems is what's enough. You've got $1 million, you want $1 million more. If you have 10 million, you want 10 million more. A little bit more. I think it was with Rockefeller who said that, wasn't it? He said, somebody asked him, how much is enough? And he said, a little more.
That sounds right. I know there's a great parody on that in The Simpsons where Burns is talking about how wealthy he is. He goes, yes, but I'd trade it all for a little more.
Right.
So yeah, but Rockefeller, that sounds about right. Or Ford. Ooh, maybe Ford said it. One of those megalomaniacs.
Right.
Zuplex is really getting a poli-sci tonight. He says the crux of America's problem has to do with the threat of Chinese competition and the pressure that has placed on middle-class wages. Unfortunately, the money classes has benefited from this.
I agree with that statement too. I mean, I couldn't find any fault in that at all. So,
yeah.
What is this?
Economic. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, no.
I was just saying, economically, things are kind of a basket case right now. But you can't blame any particular generation for that. That's more of a class struggle situation, and that's another kettle of fish because they were rich jerks in all generations and always will be.
Mm-hmm. What does this mean here?
Oh, okay. Tug says, how did you know my aunt was crazy, Thrash? Oh, because I said, any family, it's like, oh, this is my aunt. She's a little crazy. I was referring, all families have to cope with a certain amount of shenanigans among the family members, but overall maintain their family status. And I think I think that's one thing the Generation X tried to do is it's like, and of course we were the ones who really delved into our codependent status. I mean, I love saying that to people when I talk to them. There's a history of codependency in your family, isn't there? And you'd be astounded at how many times I'm right. But one of the things that we tried to do, and perhaps there was a little whitewashing involved, but one of the things we tried to do is say, okay, maybe some things in the past weren't our brightest moments. We have learned from these mistakes. Let's move forward and not dwell on them. Are you okay with that? And unfortunately, it turned out we weren't okay with that. We love to go back to the past and point fingers. Like, this is your fault for this. This is your fault for that. And we all do it. And I'm not saying we need to, expunge our own history. You have to look into your history and own it. But blaming and finger pointing never really helps, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah.
Cindy D says, when will things ever be enough? I don't know. I think the big thing right now is the situation has to stabilize. People are so keyed up right now. It's like, do you ever try to ask your mother to forgive you when she's still mad at you?
Oh,
she's
yeah.
She's not even thinking straight at this point. So trying to find rational discourse. It's just not a good time. I think when things start to simmer down a little bit, maybe we can catch our breath and actually kind of put some things in order. But As of right now, I don't know. And Tug goes on to say, our schools should be teaching economics at a much earlier age. It's shameful how few people understand very basic economics, and that warps their understanding of how things work, in my humble opinion, of course.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even a proponent of government education, of government school. I prefer privatized schools. Once you have government education, then all of a sudden parents lose control of the kids, and what can be taught and what can't be taught. And then I just am not. I've always been into more privatized education, and then people can choose. People could choose. I'm not opposed to government funds being given for education. I'm not opposed to that. I think every kid deserves an education. I totally believe that 100%. Every kid deserves an education, but I don't know why that money wouldn't go to more privatized education, so then a parent can truly choose, and there's truly a competition as to where you want your child to be. And then you can choose, oh, I don't want him in this school, I want him in this school. Maybe some schools lean more arts and liberal arts and things, and maybe some schools lean more academics, maybe some schools lean more religious. But then as a parent, you get to choose that. So that's kind of what I'm about as far as that.
Look who's here. Crominions in the house. Hey, long time no see. How you doing, man? Says Ian, Thrash, Tracy, Tug, Zuper, and Waj. How you doing, bro? Zuplex says, owning up to history is something sorely lacking in the Russian people.
Yeah. The thing is like, so we all have skeletons in our closet. So for example,
what do you know about my closet?
People in other countries, they talk about what we did to the Native Americans, and we kind of don't even think of ourselves in that. That was like a long time ago. That was something else. And the Russians may have that problem. I'm not saying they do. I'm not saying they don't. They very well could, not owning up to their own history or something like that. But is that any less of common here in America? I mean, do we not have that here as well? When you look at when we all look at, bad things that happen in other countries say that about us. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. I really don't know if it's true to the degree that the propaganda over there might say it, but they do say that when they look at us, they say, look at what these people broke treaty with these people. They kicked them off their land. They rounded them up. They made them do these kind of things. And so I think there's a little bit of that in every culture, personally speaking. I think we just got to move forward from here. I think we just got to say, let's just move forward and not necessarily worry about the past. As long as the next generation is repentant of it and wants to move forward, we shouldn't hold them accountable.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. And Cindy says, when you don't learn from history, you are doomed to repeat it. So they say. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Ian, I couldn't agree with you more. You have to look at this history. You have to learn it and learn from it. And I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm trying not to get political on this one. But there are various places that want to downplay various, for want of a better term, dark patches in American history because they are in poor taste to talk about. Poor taste or not, we have to look at them. We have to look at the demons from the past because they're not going to go away. You have to look at them and make sure that you don't do it again. As Cindy so aptly said, if you don't look at the past, you're doomed to repeat it. And people could make the cases that's happening not just in this country, but around the world, in, say, Russia and other countries. And I'm not trying to pick on the Russians either. but I think there's a lot of it comes from. See, I'm a history major. I have a degree in European history, and one of the things I've noticed from history channels and various networks that like love to provide history, there's a certain amount of what I would call post revisionist history. Like they're
Yeah.
deliberately teaching it contrary to what we knew, and they're saying, "Oh, we found new evidence, new evidence." Okay, show me this new evidence. I haven't seen this new evidence, but it's almost like they're recrafting history, and I hesitate to use the word Orwell, but it makes me uncomfortable if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Tug says, "I'm with you on that, Ian. You're starting to sound like a radical like me."
Yeah.
And Chrominian says, "Agreed." Wajimine says, "Our education is designed to keep us where we are."
Good point. Good point. I'm sure there's a lot
I
of that
get.
going on.
Well, I like the way you said that. By the way, I never really thought of it that way. But yes. Zuplex says, "But then you risk underfinancing the public school system, which would be saddled with educating the poorer classes." ENC.
No, I mean, if the parents have the ability to pay for whatever school they want to go to, I don't know how that would be under financing it. To me, it's almost like, well, what if what if the government decided to open up stores? Like, they decided that they're going that Smith's and Kroger and Albertsons or whatever place you're in now has to compete with the government system. It would be it would be a nightmare. It would really be a nightmare. Then, I don't know. Anyway, this is a big discussion, and I don't terribly want to get into it at the moment. But I mean,
I know I'm so unprepared for it.
we owned a private school, and we served a lot of poor people, and a lot of those poor people were helped by the church. They were helped by other people pulling together, and then we also did everything we could. We also would take parents, and they would say well, we'd like to clean the school or something like that. So we did a lot for everybody. We never turned anybody down for funds. Not even one time did we ever turn anybody down because of a lack of funds. We always work something out. Now, are there plenty of people who would rather buy cigarettes and beer than help with their kids' education? Yeah, there were plenty of that. But we never turned anybody down as a result of funds. And the money that is just wasted on the education system is just insane. We educated and produced top of the line, very highly academic kids who scored very high on all tests for a quarter of what they spend in other education systems. So anyway, I said I didn't want to get into it, but I just got it. Sorry. Anyway, everybody.
Oh, Trey Myers just wanted to say, "I just don't agree with banning books or phasing out subjects taught in schools. My governor wants to cancel culture them out. I can't stand it."
Yes, yeah, for sure.
And Cindy D goes on to say, "I majored in American history and minority studies."
Cool.
I took a certain amount of American history as well. I majored in European history, but I took a lot of courses in American history and poli sci as well. But I'm sure you could beat me in American history any day of the week. And I
honestly thought this would be about who had the better TV shows.
Me
who had
too.
better music.
Me too. I was expecting a fluff piece. I wish I had brushed up on my poli sci understanding.
And I'm not ready to, because I poli sci is something that I studied a long time ago, but I'm really under sharpened when it comes to this issue.
I love this from Tug. "It's fun watching you guys walk so delicately around political subjects." I know, but much like Dave, we always tended to avoid politics like it was plutonium. This show just seems to gravitate to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, we only got 10 minutes left before we're going to wrap it up here. Maybe we can actually talk about who had the best music.
Oh, hands down, that would have had That would have been the boomers, 60s and 70s, best music.
The best? What? You are insane.
I
The
am not
best.
insane. Old Motown, 70s like power rock ballads. Okay, you got Berry Gordy with the whole Motown sound. You got things like Kansas. You got Journey. You got um, other bands who I can't think of off the top of my head. Blue Oyster Cult came out of the 70s. 60s and 70s had some absolutely amazing music. Now, don't get me wrong. There was some phenomenal music that came out of the 80s. And I'm sure you could give me some incredibly good counter arguments. But again, I think the whole 80s sound was inspired by those 60s and 70s sounds. And let's not forget, rock music really started with the baby boomers. There was no rock and roll before the baby boomers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
while we may have perfected rock, they gave it to us.
For sure. But that's the thing, though. I mean, it is. I mean, I can't argue with you. It's a matter of taste, for sure. But I mean, personally speaking, no. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't bands in each of those eras that I do truly enjoy and love. But overall, my favorite is between 85 and 95. We're kind of it spans that decade of music for me.
And a lot of people did. In fairness, a lot of people did. Again, I don't think there's any wrong answer. In fact, I want to throw this out. Tug says, I love the 60s and 70s and even 40s jazz and 90s alternative. But no, it has to be the 80s. Oh, so but you see, he runs the gamut. He even went back, and there was some great music in the 30s and 40s. There was some great stuff,
right.
Big band music and stuff from back then. So
there's good music in every generation. Just the question is what's your favorite? And of course, I'd have to say Xer, of course. And then there's great stuff in the 70s that came out. I love a lot of the music that came out in the 70s, but for me, probably the best decade of music was between 85 and 95. Would have been my favorite for me personally.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I shall yield the point. Oh, I
was going to say. I was going to say what I really started to kind of fall out of loving music in the later 90s when there were certain bands that I remember bands coming out going, I just don't connect. I don't connect to these bands anymore. Maybe it's just a generation gap setting in, but I'm just I just don't connect to these bands anymore.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I've noticed that while there has been some good music that's come out in this century, I don't have the connection to it that I did in my youth.
Yes.
Well, I once said I have more rapport with my grandfather's generation than my granddaughter's generation. And to be honest, I think that even applies to music too. And that's why I just wanted to highlight this comment from Cindy. Which I lost. Oh, yeah. I love the old war songs from the 1940s and swing like Cab Calloway. Cab Calloway was actually a friend of my father's before he passed on, God rest. But yeah, there was some excellent music that even though it's not really culturally relevant to us, I connect to it. I don't get that so much in the 21st century. So again, Ian, I couldn't agree with you more on that point.
What do we got here?
I'm kind of worn out from all the. It's again. I expected TV, movies, and music, and we had this political debate. Yeah,
I should say, Generation X greatest entertainment generation. Yes or no, rather than just generation at all.
It was a fun change, I'll give you that much. But let's see. Zuplex says 60s had the folk music revival, and the Motown sound, rhythm, and blues were big back then. They certainly were.
I love folk music. I absolutely love folk music. Joni Mitchell, the Mamas and the Papas. I mean, that's just music that I just enjoy immensely.
Bobby Dylan.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and today there's a lot of folky sounding music as well that got popular. Some of it got popular a little while ago. Jack Johnson, remember him? Like he did the Curious George soundtrack. He was folk music. Another girl who's folk that I really like is Kristen Hall. If you ever listen to Kristen Hall real life stuff, that's a great folk album. I mean, it's just her and the guitar and just some really intense lyrics. I like that. I like them. There's another guy that I really like. His name's Gregory Allen Isaacoff, I think. Mm, if you're looking for good folk music, I suggest you look at him. A song called San Luis is a really good song, but everything he does is real good. Iron and Wine is another good modern kind of folk music uh, song. You know, you can talk about music and go on for days.
I gotta say this one. Cindy D says it's just hard to say that Michael Jackson and Quarter Flash is oldies. I know, right? Michael Jackson's first hit is over 50 years old now. How's that for you? Does that not stagger the mind?
Yeah. Well, I saw a meme today that it said if Back to the Future came out today, Marty McFly would have traveled back to 1996 or 95 or whatever it was.
How so?
So if it was made today, like if it was made today and a kid from today had to travel back to the same amount of time that Marty
30
McFly,
years.
Yeah.
Yes.
That would have been like 1995.
Now I got you. Well, here's one for you. I was thinking about this the other day. I was at work and I was talking with my manager, who's another Three Stooges buff, about the Three Stooges, and I said this dawned on me the other day. My first exposure to the Three Stooges, my mom and dad took me to visit my grandparents. My uncles were still living at home at the time. Some of them were still in high school, and I went down to the family room to watch TV with them, and they were watching these funny black and white men going around hitting each other, saying funny things. It was the Three Stooges. I was probably 4 at this point, right? That was my first exposure to the Three Stooges. More time has elapsed since that day till now than since the Three Stooges were contemporary to that moment.
Yeah.
Doesn't that, I mean, there was only about 35, 40 years. That moment I'm talking about is 50 years ago.
Wow.
So my exposure to the Three Stooges is older than the Three Stooges were to me when I was a kid. So yeah, it's the idea of that point in time. The reference points, I guess, what we're trying to say, but
time is a funny thing. Time is a funny thing.
It terrifies me.
Have you ever looked at pictures of people from previous generations and like they're in high school and they look 30? Have you ever noticed that?
Yes, yeah. They have receding hairlines.
Well, this is very interesting. Vsauce does a thing on this time illusion thing, and what they'll do is they'll take those same people, same skin tone and everything, and put them in modern clothes, and then they look their age.
Really?
Yeah. It's more of a perception thing. It's more of a perception thing than an actual thing. So
I believe that.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah, I love Vsauce, by the way. There's always like something I've been watching and then like I'll say it now and again, but Vsauce has always been one of my all-time favorite shows to watch. If you ever get a chance to watch it.
There's something on YouTube as well, by the way, where they took sculptures and artwork of famous people, sometimes going back to the classical times, like Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, and they use technology where the first generations, they look like a Muppet almost, but they've gotten so good, you would swear it's like somebody like they're just dressed up like Cleopatra, and their lips move and they blink and they have like facial expressions. It's amazing. They can actually show you, based on the artist's rendering, what these people look like from 2,000 years ago. It's like,
it's crazy.
It is
it's really crazy.
It is.
All right, folks. Well, unfortunately, I'm not getting any better. So
you held up well. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. A couple times there, my voice cracked, kind of near the beginning as I kind of went along, kind of flowed, but I'm feeling just a tad under the weather. Been feeling a tad under the weather this whole time. So we're going to keep it at an hour. I just want to thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was a lively conversation, a little bit more political. I hope nobody holds my views against me. I love you all, and I think that you're all great. And I'm just so happy that you will support the channel just by being here and showing up and talking about it. And ideas are great. I love ideas, even if we agree to disagree. Ideas are never bad. We all need to have our own ideas, except for you, Thrash. You need to have my ideas. No.
Fair enough.
I'm
My
kidding.
ideas are dangerous. So,
All right.
So,
All
thanks
right.
everyone. Be good, be safe, be careful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you really, really soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Peace.